Emma Green had never been good at saying no. Not to her boss when he called her into late shifts at the cafe, not to her landlord when he raised the rent again despite the peeling paint, not even to the cab driver who insisted she pay in cash because his card machine was broken. She was tired of folding to everyone else's demands, but when David knelt in front of her in the middle of that crowded park with a ring that looked like it had been bought secondhand, her heart did what her head refused to do. It said yes. The word came out like a whisper, raspy and fragile after holding its breath too long, but it rippled through the crowd like thunder. Strangers clapped, snapped photos, even whistled as if they had witnessed something magical. Emma forced a smile through trembling lips, accepting the modest ring David pushed onto her finger. It was slightly too big, wobbling as though uncertain it belonged there. But David's eyes brimmed with emotion, and for a moment she let herself drown in the warmth that radiated from the sincerity of his gaze. She told herself none of the doubts mattered. Not the fact that their 3 dinner dates had all ended with water, soup, and excuses about not being hungry. Not that he lived in a sparse 1-bedroom flat where the sheets didn't quite fit the mattress. Not even that her best friend Julie had warned her bluntly, "Emma, men who claim to be broke are either broke for real or hiding something worse. Be careful." Emma ignored the warning. Standing under the fading sunset, wrapped in David's arms as he whispered that she had just made him the happiest man alive, Emma convinced herself it wasn't foolishness. It was bravery. Love wasn't measured by bank accounts. She had grown up watching her parents' marriage dissolve under the crushing weight of debt. If she valued money over sincerity now, wasn't she just repeating the same mistake, just in another form? Still, when the applause faded, when the crowd dispersed, and when David finally admitted with a sheepish smile that he couldn't afford dinner to celebrate, Emma's chest grew tight with unease. They walked the rest of the evening holding hands, but Emma's mind wasn't where her body was. She kept thinking of questions she never dared ask. Why did David avoid talking about his family? Why did he hate when she mentioned the future in financial terms? Mortgages, savings, children? And why did he always brush off her concerns with the same 5 words? "It'll work out, love?" The trouble was, Emma wanted it to work. At 26, she was tired of feeling like life was always happening to other people. Julie was engaged to a charming attorney. Her younger brother had moved abroad, already sending home glossy photos of beaches. Even her manager at the cafe, with his oily hair and constant sneer, had someone to bring lunch to him every day. Emma wanted her story too, and maybe she was ready to believe that David, the quiet man with threadbare jackets and soft-spoken promises, could be it. But later that week, reality slapped her back into focus. They were sitting in the corner of the cafe where she worked, David sipping black coffee so slowly it was almost comical. He never bought food, only the cheapest drink possible, and even that sometimes seemed like a stretch. Emma didn't mind, but she hated the way co-workers raised their eyebrows and smirked whenever he came in. "Dave, you're practically part of the furniture," one barista joked, plunking down napkins. "You want us to name a chair after you?" David smiled politely, the way he always did, brushing off mockery with that calm, unreadable demeanor. But Emma caught the flicker in his eyes, the irritation he never voiced. When her shift ended, David walked her home. They passed shop windows, each glittering with things she couldn't afford. Handbags, jewelry, pastries shining with sugar under golden lights. Emma pretended not to look too long, but David noticed anyway. "You deserve nicer things," he murmured suddenly. Emma blinked. "What?" "You pretend you don't care, but I see it. You've never had anything truly yours. That's going to change." Emma laughed good-naturedly, shaking her head. "All I need is us. I don't care about the rest." But deep down, her chest tightened again. Words like his didn't sound like the kind of thing someone broke would say. They sounded like promises from a man who already had power but didn't want to admit it. 2 days later, her curiosity found fuel. She had insisted on bringing soup to David's flat, a tiny box of a place on an old street corner. While he was in the shower, she set the bowls on chipped plates. That's when she noticed something. An envelope cracked open on the table. Not a bill. Not junk mail. But a letter embossed with lettering that shimmered faintly in the light. Clarion Estates Holdings. Emma touched it lightly, tracing the expensive gold trim. She had never seen correspondence that formal. The paper felt thick, weighty, foreign in a room where the couch sagged and the wallpaper peeled. Just as her fingers lingered on the seal, David's voice echoed down the hall. Emma? Did you bring spoons? She jumped back, nearly knocking the envelope onto the floor. Heart hammering, she grabbed the bowls and marched them to the table, faking composure. That night she couldn't sleep. Images of the letter pulsed through her thoughts. Clarion Estates Holdings. What did it mean? Why had David brushed past any questions about his life before they met? Why would someone with access to such wealthy-looking correspondence be living like this? The puzzle gnawed at her until morning. By the time sunlight streamed through her curtains, Emma knew one thing for certain. David wasn't just the man she had said yes to in the park. He was something more. Something hidden. And if she didn't uncover the truth soon, it would either destroy her faith, or vindicate it beyond her wildest imagination. Emma told herself that curiosity was harmless, but curiosity has sharp edges when it slices into trust. Each time she looked at David, she saw two men, the gentle, penny-pinching lover who made her tea with too much sugar in chipped mugs, and the stranger who left envelopes with golden lettering stacked carelessly on his cluttered table. She tried for 3 days not to mention it. She kept her voice light during their conversations, nodded when he carried on about a novel he was reading, and brushed aside the worry that maybe she had agreed to marry someone who was keeping entire continents of truth hidden beneath his polite smile. But every time his phone buzzed and he silenced it quickly, every time he dodged questions about his past with a joke, the weight in her stomach grew heavier. On the fourth evening, rain pounding against her small apartment window, Emma caved. They were eating reheated pasta on her couch, the twins across the hall thumping upstairs as their parents shouted, when Emma blurted, "David, what's Clarion Estates Holdings?" The fork froze in his hand. Emma's ears burned. She hadn't meant to sound so sharp. She tried to soften her tone. I happened to see an envelope at your place. It looked important. What is it?" For a split second, David's calm cracked. His eyes, normally a soft brown that made her forget the world when he looked at her, sharpened like flint. Then just as quickly the steel vanished. He cleared his throat, set the fork down, and leaned back with a deliberate, easy grin. "Emma," he said quietly, "you've been snooping?" Her cheeks flushed. It was right there." "I'm not upset," he cut in, though his voice held a weight that pressed against her ribs. "Just curious why you didn't ask me sooner." Emma swallowed. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, "Because I didn't know if you'd lie to me." The silence that followed hit harder than thunder. Rain slapped the window, their pasta cooled, and Emma wondered if she had just tilted the fragile world they had built into pieces on the floor. David reached over, took her hand slowly. His thumb smoothed across her palm with measured patience. "Clarion Estates," he said evenly, "is a place I used to work with. Old family business. Complicated history. You don't need to worry about it." "That's all?" she asked. "That's all." But Emma knew it wasn't. His eyes betrayed it. The way he said family nearly caught in his throat. The way he deflected so neatly made her more certain he was hiding something colossal. The conversation died after that. They finished their meal, exchanged small talk, kissed goodnight at the door, but Emma's head buzzed like a hive. Later, lying in the dark, she replayed something Julie had once told her about relationships. When a man won't talk about his past, it's not because it doesn't matter. It's because it matters too much. The unease crept into her dreams. She saw David dressed in suits sharper than knives, speaking to people she couldn't see, building walls of glass that blinded her from his true world. She woke breathless, heart hammering, clutching her hand where the modest ring sat loose. By morning she promised herself, she needed proof. Not to attack him, not to accuse him, but to finally understand the man she had agreed to share her life with. Her chance came sooner than she expected. The following Saturday, David suggested they walk downtown. "Fresh air," he insisted. "You've been working too hard." They strolled past bakeries glowing with warm bread smells, bookstores stacked to ceilings, and spotless wine bars where polished couples laughed over glasses they didn't check the price of. Emma loved the city but always felt like an intruder in its shiniest corners. David, however, walked with a strange comfort. He didn't gaze at the stores like she did, longing. He didn't scowl like others who couldn't afford them. He seemed familiar with it, like he belonged. As they passed one particularly grand building, black marble steps, golden lettering, Emma noticed something. A man came rushing down the steps, Pressed suit, polished shoes, folder clutched to his chest. He nearly tripped when he spotted David. "Sir," the man blurted out of breath. "We weren't expecting you until Monday." Emma froze. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He shook his head. "Not now," he said firmly, barely glancing at the man. "Later." The man swallowed hard, nodded, and retreated immediately, murmuring apologies. Emma's skin prickled. "David," she whispered as soon as they were alone again. "What was that?" "Nothing important," he said quickly. "He's mistaken me for someone else." "No, he called you sir." Her words shook. "He knew you. You didn't deny it." David stopped walking. Rain from earlier still glistened on the concrete, turning streetlights into twin halos beneath their feet. He stared at her for a long moment, lips pressed into a line. Finally, softly, "Emma, there are things about me you don't know." "Not yet. And if you did, you might stop believing the man in front of you is real." Emma's throat tightened. "Then show me. Stop hiding." But David shook his head. "Not tonight." She wanted to scream, but her voice collapsed into silence. Trust felt like holding shards of glass. Every squeeze cut deeper, but letting go meant shattering entirely. That night she tossed in her bed, replaying the encounter on the marble steps. Her mind wrestled. If David carried secrets this heavy, why choose to live modestly at all? Why pretend to be poor when wealth clearly followed him? Was it a test? A game? A lie? Or something far deeper? Something that might force her to question whether the yes she'd whispered in the park had tethered her to a stranger rather than the man she thought she loved? Emma clutched the ring, stared into the dark, and made a quiet promise. She would not let this go. She needed the truth even if it broke her. Because fairy tales didn't start with deception. And love, if it was real, had to survive the unmasking. Emma woke the next morning with resolve tightening her chest. Too long she had lived as if life happened to her, shoving aside doubts for the sake of comfort. But now comfort was gone. That moment on the marble steps haunted her. David being addressed as "Sir," the man's panicked obedience, David's refusal to explain. It was as if two versions of her fiancé were warring before her eyes. One simple, poor, introverted, sipping cheap coffee at her workplace, and another who resembled someone important. Someone feared. Someone obeyed. She decided to watch more closely. Over the next week she paid attention to the smallest things. The way David always turned his phone face down when it buzzed. The way he never seemed fazed by prices though he rarely spent. The way people in expensive restaurants looked at him almost instinctively, with fleeting recognition he brushed off. Emma wasn't a natural liar, but she learned fast. "You're quieter than usual," David commented warmly one evening as they strolled through a park. "Just tired," she replied with the faintest smile, though her mind churned. Tired from cataloging every clue. Tired of replaying his words, "There are things about me you don't know." But one evening pushed everything further. She arrived at his apartment earlier than usual. She had her manager shift her hours, pretending it was to get rest, when in reality she wanted to surprise him. The door was unlocked. Inside, his flat was not as cluttered as it used to be. The sagging couch was suddenly draped with a clean throw, the peeling wallpaper partly hidden behind tall shelves, and on the table sat a folder, thick and neat. Emma's heartbeat spiked. She knew she shouldn't. She knew it was crossing into trespass. But the longer she stared, the harder it was to resist. She pulled the folder closer, sliding out the first sheet. Columns of numbers. Massive numbers. Properties, holdings, foreign investments. It looked like a summary of wealth she could barely imagine. The second sheet speared her deeper. Lists of names, each attached to addresses embroidered with words like Tower, Plaza, International. At the top, embossed in gold again, Clarion Estates Holdings. She nearly dropped the paper. Her eyes darted to the door. What if he came back now? What would she say? Her pulse galloped as adrenaline iced her fingers. She shoved the pages back, slammed the folder shut just as footsteps echoed outside. The key turned. Emma snapped upright, willing her breathing to slow as David stepped inside. He looked weary, raindrops clinging to his jacket. But his eyes, sharp as always, darted to the table. "You're early," he said softly, walking forward. "Waiting long?" Emma forced her lips into a smile. "Not at all. Pasta's ready on the stove." His gaze lingered on the folder for half a second too long. Then, softly, almost too softly, he asked, "You didn't touch anything here, did you?" Emma swallowed. "No, of course not. Why would I?" Suspicion flickered across his face, then dissolved. He smiled faintly and stepped closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I just worry about you getting bored. Numbers aren't exciting." Her laugh came out shakier than she hoped. That night, while David slept soundly beside her, Emma lay wide awake. "He knows I looked," she thought. "He just doesn't want to confront it yet." She turned on her side, staring at his profile in the dim moonlight. He slept like a man who carried burdens she could not see, jaw set even in dreams, hand loose but twitching like he was always half prepared to fight. Emma whispered into the air, so quiet no one would hear, "Who are you really?" The answer arrived 2 days later, not with words but with spectacle. They were walking downtown, arms linked, when a black car eased to the curb. Men in suits stepped out, the kind Emma only saw in films. They weren't smiling. Their eyes flicked over her briefly before locking onto David. "Sir," one said with a respectful nod. "You're wanted at the Clarion office." Immediately. Emma jolted, stunned, silent. He knows them. They know him. David's body stiffened. A muscle leapt at his jaw. "Not now," he replied flatly. "Sir, it's urgent." David met the man's gaze coldly, then nodded once. "Very well." He turned to Emma, mask softening. "Give me an hour?" Emma could barely nod, her mind whirling too fast. He pressed a kiss against her hand before stepping into the car. The door closed. The vehicle disappeared smoothly into traffic, leaving her standing alone on the street, heart thundering like a runaway drum. Every nerve screamed at her, "He isn't poor. He never was." Emma staggered home on legs made of fog. She collapsed in her apartment, pressing her palms to her face, tears hot against her skin. She didn't know whether to feel betrayed, afraid, or strangely proud, that the man who kissed her like she was all that mattered was simultaneously someone the world seemed to obey. Her phone buzzed. A message. "I'll explain soon. Trust me." 3 words stuck harder than the rest. "Trust me." Emma curled around her pillow, voice breaking into the darkness. "But how can I, when everything you've shown me is a lie?" Emma spent the next day pacing her small apartment, wearing grooves into the faded carpet. She couldn't concentrate on anything. Her work, her books, even the tea cooling untouched on the table. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that black car pulling David inside, saw the deference in the men's eyes as they called him sir. When he finally arrived at her door that evening, her heart skipped with both relief and dread. "Emma," he said softly, standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat collar. "Can I come in?" Her throat tightened. She nodded but didn't move closer. He stepped inside, heavy silence clinging to his shoulders. For a long while neither spoke, the only sounds the ticking clock and the soft groan of the pipes beneath the floorboards. "Where did you go yesterday?" Her voice cracked halfway through. David met her gaze, unreadable. "Work." "That wasn't work. That was—" She gestured helplessly, anger surging to mask her fear. "David, men in suits don't pull broke cafe regulars into sleek cars like it's life or death. That wasn't normal. None of this is normal." He inhaled slowly, his jaw flexing. "You're right. It's not." Her stomach twisted. "So, who are you? And don't give me another vague half-truth. I'm done pretending not to notice. If you want me to marry you, then no more lies." The demand rang louder than she expected. His eyes darkened, but not with anger, something else. Calculation. Maybe pain. He set his coat on the back of a chair, moved slowly, and sat opposite her at the small table. "Emma," he began carefully, "I was never going to be able to keep it from you forever. I just wanted to know you loved me for who I am, not what I have." She froze. Her pulse hammered. "So you do have something." His lips twitched into a humorless smile. "Yes, I do. More than you think. The truth is, Clarion Estates Holdings isn't some distant family business. It's mine." Emma's breath caught. She blinked, trying to process. "Yours? As in, you own?" "Yes." His voice was steady but quiet. "I'm the majority shareholder and CEO. Clarion is one of the largest real estate holdings companies on the East Coast. Towers, hotels, office complexes, we own them. I own them." Emma felt as though the floor had tilted. Everything blurred. The cheap coffee habits, the second-hand ring, the low-key apartment. They clashed violently with the revelation now hanging in the air. "You're telling me," she whispered, "that all this time you were rich? Not just rich, obscenely rich." David hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes." Her body tingled like ice biting through her veins. Her first instinct was disbelief. Her second was fury. "Why?" she demanded, voice rising. "Why pretend to be poor? Why let me think you were barely scraping by while you, She broke off, words colliding with the thundering in her chest. He leaned forward, eyes locking on hers with intensity. "Because I needed to know you saw me. Not the empire. Not the money. Just me. Do you have any idea how impossible that is in my world?" Emma's hands shook. "But lying to me? David, you let me make life choices with that lie in the middle. You asked me to marry you without telling me. That's not love. That's manipulation." The words sliced. She saw his flinch, how it fractured his composure. "I never meant it like that," he said hoarsely. "I've spent years hiding behind wealth, walls, expectations. When I met you, I wanted escape. A chance to be ordinary. And then I fell in love before I could catch myself." Emma's chest ached. Anger mixed with heartbreak, tangled and messy. Part of her wanted to believe him, to see the sincerity in his pleading gaze. Another part screamed that this was betrayal, monumental and unforgivable. "So, all those nights you said you couldn't afford dinner? All those half-truths." "I wasn't testing you," he said quickly. "I was protecting myself. I didn't want to lose you to suspicion. To greed. People change when they know what I am. I needed to know if you wouldn't." Emma blinked back tears. "And did you ever stop to think how I'd feel once I found out? Did you think I'd thank you for treating me like some experiment? Like I had to prove my worth by loving you broke before you gifted me your reality?" Tears stung his eyes too. "Emma, I wasn't testing your love, I was testing whether I deserved it." The words silenced the room. Her heart cracked wider, splitting under the contradictions. He sat before her, David, who had walked her home in the rain, who had kissed her hands like they were precious, who now claimed to hold an empire in his grip. And suddenly the ring on her finger, too loose, too modest, felt heavier than stone. She pulled her hand from his slowly, setting it on the table between them. "I need time," she whispered. David nodded once, shoulders sagging, eyes duller than she'd ever seen them. He didn't try to stop her as she stood, as she turned toward the door, as she grabbed her coat and left him sitting in silence. On the walk home, Emma's thoughts ricocheted violently. Was she angrier at him for lying, or angrier at herself for believing the illusion? Was she afraid of his wealth, or afraid of losing the one man who'd made her feel safe in years? Each question pulsed like a wound. At her apartment, she collapsed on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling until morning light seeped through. Exhaustion blurred into resolve. She would not run from this. She would demand the full truth. Because if David really was the hidden empire behind Clarion, then her yes had bound her not to a broke barista regular, but to a man with power that could either destroy her life or change it forever. Emma didn't answer David's calls for 3 days. Her phone buzzed, lit up, fell silent, over and over until she shut it off entirely. She needed space, or at least the illusion of it. She needed her thoughts to be hers again, because every time his name flashed across the screen, she felt her chest seize, half in longing, half in anger. Julie noticed first. "You look like death," Julie said bluntly as they sat in the cafe during Emma's break. Her friend eyed the untouched pastry, then Emma's hollow expression. "What's going on? Did you finally listen to me and dump the mystery man?" Emma pressed her lips together. Sharing the truth felt dangerous. How could she explain that the man Julie thought was broke was secretly one of the wealthiest men in the city? It sounded like fantasy, borderline delusion. But Julie's sharp eyes softened and Emma cracked. "He lied to me," Emma whispered. Julie leaned in. "What kind of lie?" "The kind that changes everything." Emma bit her lip until she tasted blood. "He's not who I thought." "Not at all." Julie frowned. "Emma, are you safe?" The question startled her. She almost laughed. Safe wasn't the word. Overwhelmed, yes. Confused, aching, betrayed, but not unsafe. David had never hurt her, never even raised his voice. Still, the scale of his deception felt heavier than any bruise could. "I don't know," Emma admitted. "That night, Exhaustion pressed down so heavily that Emma fell asleep in her work uniform on the couch. When she woke, her phone, back on the charger, vibrated with a new message. From David. I know I owe you everything, the truth, the choice, the apology. But please don't decide we're over before you've seen my world. I'll be outside at 7 tomorrow. If you don't want to come, I'll never bother you again. But if you do, I'll show you why I hid it and what it really means. Emma read it 6 times, her pulse skittering. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, scream, ignore it. But she couldn't. Not when her heart still clenched at the thought of walking away without answers. When 7 p.m. came, she stepped outside to find him waiting. The car that pulled up was nothing like the modest buses and taxis she was used to. Black, sleek, silent, with windows tinted dark. David emerged before she could freeze, his expression cautious, almost pleading. You came, he said softly. Don't make me regret it, she said, folding her arms. He opened the door. She slid into leather so smooth it felt unreal. The city blurred past as silence stretched. Finally, David spoke. I never wanted to hurt you. That's the truth. But hiding from my own life is easier. You've seen the world where people clap for proposals, cheer at fake fairy tales. My life is the part after. Where people smile because they want something, where love is currency. Emma stayed silent, choosing not to rescue him from the weight of his own words. The car slowed in front of a building that took her breath away. Glass walls soared into the night sky, sharp and perfect, reflecting city lights like captive stars. The entrance buzzed with guards, attendants, polished marble. Above, golden letters gleamed, Clarion Tower. Emma's heart slammed. This is yours? She whispered. David glanced at her. Yes. He led her inside, not holding her hand, though she caught the flicker of longing in his glance. Employees, professionals in sleek suits, stiffened when they saw him. Some nodded reverently. Others stepped sharply aside. Always sir, never David. Emma followed through corridors where every surface gleamed wealth. Yet David's posture seemed weary rather than proud, like a man burdened by a kingdom he never wanted. In his office, an expanse of glass overlooking the city, desk carved like sculpture. He turned to her finally. This is the truth, he said simply. This is what I am. But it isn't who I want to be when I'm with you. Emma clutched her purse tighter, trying to focus on steady breathing. The enormity of it all pressed down. It's not that you're rich, David. That you lied. You let me believe in a version of you that didn't exist. His jaw tightened, eyes shadowed. And if I had been honest from the start? Would you have believed I wanted you, and not just another starry-eyed woman chasing security? Or would you have doubted every word I said, even the truths? Emma hesitated. The painful thing was, he might be right. She would have doubted. Still, anger lingered. You don't get to decide what I would have done. You robbed me of the chance to choose. He stepped closer, voice raw. Then choose now. Walk out that door and I'll never follow. Or stay, and I'll spend the rest of my days proving I love you for you, not for what story you fit into my life. Emma's breath shuddered. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to hurl every emotion tangled inside her chest. But beneath it all, his gaze was the same one that had once steadied her when her world spun. The same one that had rocked her hand in the park, trembling but committed. She whispered, Show me then. Prove it. Prove you're more than this, more than money, more than power. Prove you're still the man I said yes to. For the first time since the truth split them apart, David's shoulders eased just slightly. Then give me time. And watch. Emma didn't answer. She turned to the window, city glittering like a sea of unreachable stars, wondering if she had just handed her fragile heart back to the very man who had broken it. Emma thought the weight of David's empire would hit her all at once, like a crashing wave. Instead, it seeped slowly, creeping into corners of her life she never expected. It started the moment she entered the lobby of Clarion Tower again, 3 days after David had shown her his office. She had told herself she was only there to return a scarf he'd left at her apartment, nothing more. But the way people looked at her, like she was an intruder who didn't belong in the gleaming hall, sent prickles across her skin. The receptionist, polished and aloof, didn't hide her disdain. Her eyes flicked over Emma's plain jeans and cardigan, lips tightening ever so slightly. And you are? She asked, voice clipped. Emma straightened. Emma Green. I have something for Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark is very busy, the woman said, already reaching for the phone as if to summon security. Before Emma could protest, David appeared beside them. She's with me. And instantly the air shifted. All hesitation evaporated in the receptionist's expression. Her voice softened, posture straightened. Of course, sir, she murmured, eyes darting to Emma with a brand of scrutiny that made Emma's stomach twist. Later, when the elevator doors closed behind them, Emma whispered, "They look at me like I don't belong here." David glanced at her, expression unreadable. Because they've never seen me let anyone belong here before. The words echoed. She wasn't sure if they comforted or frightened her. That afternoon, as she lingered near the edge of his office, pretending to busy herself with the skyline view while he fired off instructions to executives in brisk, commanding tones, she realized something she had never seen clearly before. David wasn't simply wealthy. He wasn't simply powerful. He was a man people deferred to, obeyed without hesitation. He carried responsibility on his back in ways she struggled to imagine. Contracts, decisions, billions of dollars hinging on his voice alone. And he expected her to somehow fit in. Later, in the cafe the two of them often went to, Emma sipped her latte without tasting it. David had come straight from a board meeting, still crisp in his suit. But even in a more casual setting, people noticed him differently now that she knew the truth. She saw the subtle glances from strangers, small nods of respect, even envy. It was like watching the same man through new eyes, and it scared her. "Why me, David?" she blurted suddenly. His brow furrowed. "What do you mean? You could have anyone. Women who know how to walk in this world. Who wouldn't flinch when they walk into your tower. Who dress the part, speak the language. Why me?" He leaned back slightly, studying her with an intensity that almost burned. "Because no one else saw me. Not the suits, not the empire. Just me. You." His hand reached across the table but paused, hesitating. "You never wanted anything from me except my time. Do you know how rare that is?" Emma swallowed hard. His words struck deep. But fear still gnawed at her. This wasn't just about love anymore, it was about whether their two worlds could even breathe the same air. The test came sooner than she thought. A week later, David invited her to a small gathering, not one of his grand galas, but a private dinner with a handful of investors and executives. "It's nothing formal. Just a chance to be by my side," he assured her. But the restaurant screamed exclusivity the moment she stepped inside. Golden chandeliers dripped light onto white tablecloths. Glassware sparkled. Conversations floated, clipped and polished. Emma's nerves frayed instantly. She didn't know which fork to use or how to soften the stiffness in her voice when a woman in diamonds asked too casually, "And how long have you known David?" "Just under a year," Emma replied, her voice betraying more nerves than she wanted. The woman's eyes flicked over Emma's thrift store dress, then back to her wine. Her smile was polite but the meaning was clear. Throughout the evening, Emma felt the invisible wall. Questions veiled as curiosities. Subtle glances exchanged across the table. It was the same expression she had seen on the receptionist's face, skepticism cloaked in civility. She tried to focus on David's calm presence, but it wasn't enough to shield her from the weight of judgment pressing in from all sides. By dessert, her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her spoon. She set it down, taking a shaky breath. David noticed immediately. "Need some air?" he murmured. She nodded quickly, grateful. Outside, night air cooled her burning cheeks. She leaned against the smooth stone of the building, drawing breath like a woman surfacing from underwater. David joined her, quiet at first. Then softly, "They don't matter, Emma?" She laughed bitterly. "That's easy for you to say. To them I'm a project. A temporary distraction. I don't belong in your world, David." His gaze sharpened. "Don't ever say that. You belong wherever you choose to." But she shook her head. "You don't see it. You've lived with power so long you don't notice the way people act around you. I do. And it feels like drowning." For the first time in a long while, David didn't have an immediate answer. That silence unsettled her more than scorn could. They drove home with words unsaid between them. Emma sat curled in her corner of the car, heart aching with contradictions. She loved him. She hated the lie. She wanted to trust him. She feared what his world demanded of her. Every emotion twisted until she felt like breaking. That night, as she lay awake in bed, she turned the ring on her finger, the ring too modest for his empire, but too heavy with memory to throw away. All she could think was, if I stay I'll have to change. And if I change, will I still be me? Emma didn't notice the gossip at first. It was subtle, folded into polite questions with razor edges, into glances that lasted a breath too long. But slowly the whispers became undeniable. She heard them one afternoon when she insisted on meeting David outside the tower instead of inside. Investors streamed from the revolving doors, gold watches glinting under the sunlight. Emma lingered near the edge, waiting, when two women in sleek blazers exited behind her. They didn't even lower their voices. So that's her, one whispered. The waitress? From the cafe. Unbelievable. He'll come to his senses soon. They always do. Emma's face burned as the women disappeared into a waiting car. She folded her arms tightly across her chest, fighting both the urge to run and the surge of humiliation pulsing through her veins. When David finally appeared, smiling as if she were the only familiar face in the universe, Emma pasted on a calm expression. She didn't tell him what she'd heard. Not then. Because the shame felt too raw, too sharp. But the world wasn't going to wait. 2 nights later, Emma got her test in crueler form. David had invited her to a gala, something she initially refused. She couldn't bear another evening of missteps across polished floors. But he had insisted, softly, reassuringly. You won't be alone. I'll be with you the entire time. So she went. And she regretted it instantly. The ballroom glowed gold, gowns flowing like rivers, diamonds dripping from every wrist, every throat. Cameras flashed, photographers hovered like moths near chandeliers. Emma felt like she was walking into a cage. David's hand was warm against hers, steadying. He introduced her to people with confidence, naming her firmly, Emma Green. But nobody answered, welcome. They answered with faint smiles, perfumed nods, a politeness laced with dismissal. Until one man didn't bother with the mask. Tall, sharp features, confidence that bled arrogance. He approached with a glass of champagne dangling from his fingers as though it were an extension of his hand. His gaze slid over Emma lazily before snapping to David. So this is her, he said. Emma stiffened. David's tone cooled instantly. This is Emma. The man smiled, not at her but at him. You surprise me, David. I thought after everything your family taught you, you'd know better than to bring distractions into these halls. Emma's fingers tightened around David's hand. She didn't trust herself to speak. Careful, David said sharply. But the man only smirked. You know how it goes. You'll enjoy the rebellion for a while, waving your ordinary romance like a banner, but eventually, his eyes flicked to Emma briefly then back. Eventually reality snaps back. She'll break under it. Or you'll send her away. Everyone's seen it before. Emma's whole body burned. Shame. Rage. Fear. The mixture left her trembling. David's jaw set like stone. Leave, Marcus. The man raised his glass in mock salute, sauntering away with laughter in his eyes. Emma barely made it outside before the tears came. She leaned against the cold marble wall, gasping for air as if the chandelier-lit room had suffocated her. David followed moments later, his coat already off, reaching for her. Emma? She shook her head hard. Don't. I can't. They don't matter. Yes, they do, she snapped louder than she expected. Her chest heaved as people outside turned to glance. She lowered her voice, trembling. They matter because this is your world. These people, their judgments, their whispers, that's your life. And right now, I'm the punchline. He looked stricken, as though her words had cut deeper than Marcus's insult. Emma, listen to me. They don't define us. They never will. But they define you, she said bitterly. They always have. Otherwise, why would you spend your whole life proving them wrong? Building towers and empires just to silence the voices that doubted you? And now you want me to stand in that fire beside you? But I'm not built for it, David. I'm not made to withstand that storm. Silence fell. His hand, halfway lifted, hung in the air. His eyes glistened in the soft glow of streetlights. Then he whispered, You are stronger than you think. Emma's throat closed. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to be strong enough for this life. But strength felt like a foreign word when every glance made her shrink smaller. That night she barely spoke on the drive back. He didn't push. When they reached her apartment, David turned to her once more. "Emma," he said softly, "I know this is hell. But don't give them the victory of seeing you walk away. Don't let them write your story for you." She gripped the loose ring on her finger, staring down at the pale line it had drawn on her skin over weeks of wearing it. Slowly she whispered, "And if I walk away myself? If I decide I don't want to live like this?" His breath caught. Quietly, painfully, he said, "Then I'll spend the rest of my life wishing you'd said otherwise. But I won't stop you." Emma held back her tears until she was alone. Alone in her quiet flat, staring at the shadows on her walls while the echo of Marcus's scorn rang in her head. She hated this world. She hated its claws, its cruelty. But more than anything, she hated that part of her still ached for David's voice, David's gaze, David's defense. Hated that beneath all the fire, her heart still whispered, "Don't leave him." Not yet. Emma stayed away from David for almost a week. Not because she didn't miss him, she did painfully, but because she needed time to breathe without the weight of his world pressing down on her chest. She needed to define herself again outside questions of empire and gossip. She poured into her cafe shifts, worked extra hours, tried to lose herself in routine. But even there, whispers found her. Customers leaned in, gossip spilling from lips too eager. "Did you hear about Clark? The CEO? They say he's got some secret girlfriend." Emma's hands froze mid-wipe across a table. "Poor thing. Better enjoy it while it lasts," someone chuckled. Each word seared. She concentrated on her tasks, but her heart screamed. She hated being a shadow in someone else's conversation, her story twisted before it was even told. Julie noticed the tremor in her hands. "Em," she said softly, tugging her into the back. "You don't have to let them walk over you." "What am I supposed to do?" Emma whispered. "March out there announcing my place at his side?" Julie's brows knit. "No. But you can stand up straighter. Stop letting shame drip into your bones like you've done something wrong. You haven't. They don't get to write your story. You do." Emma bit her lip. The words echoed David's, but somehow hearing them from Julie, they lodged in her chest differently. A seed of something small but real. That night when David texted, "I miss you. Please let me see you," she didn't delete it. She stared at it, hands shaking. Against her own fear, she replied, "Lunch tomorrow. Neutral ground." He was waiting at the small riverside park when she arrived. For once, no cars, no suits. Just David in a simple shirt, leaning against a bench with wary hope in his eyes. "You came," he said quietly, as though afraid even to breathe wrong. Emma crossed her arms, steadying herself. "I need answers, David. Real ones. Not evasions. If I'm supposed to survive in your world, I have to know what I'm walking into." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Ask me." She took a deep breath. "Why me? And don't give me the 'you saw me' line again. Why me when everyone in your life thinks I'll crumble?" "Because you remind me what matters," he answered without hesitation. His eyes latched onto hers. "Do you know how easy it is, Emma, to forget? When you've got power, money, when everything is numbers, deals, towers, it's easy to forget the human heart, the small things. With you, I don't forget. I can breathe. I remember my mother making stew out of nothing just to keep us fed. I remember what it means to love without conditions." Emma's throat thickened. But she pressed, "And where does that leave me? Forever your outsider, forever frowned at." "No," his voice snapped with sudden fire. "You are not their outsider. You're my chosen. And eventually they'll have to respect that. Or leave." Emma blinked at the steel in him. The ruthlessness she had only glimpsed in boardrooms now turned toward her defense. It startled her, but warmed something fragile inside. Still, she spoke softly, "It's not only about them, David. It's about me. If I stay, I have to be strong, not just standing beside you like a shadow. I have to be Emma Green, not just the girl he picked. Do you get that?" He stared at her for a beat, then, slowly, smiled. "That's exactly why I love you." The words hit like a tremor, shaking loose something she didn't realize she'd been clutching tight. She was silent, staring at the rippling water, letting his admission sink into her bones. At last she whispered, "I'm scared." "I know," he said. His hand reached, hovered, then touched hers. "But fear doesn't mean you can't walk forward." The world stayed complicated after that. Whispers didn't vanish overnight. Marcus and others in his circle still murmured their doubts. But Emma began holding herself differently. She didn't apologize for being present. When she entered spaces with David, she lifted her chin a little higher, even when her stomach still twisted. Small moments revealed her quiet growth. When a server at a gala misaddressed her dismissively as Miss Nobody, she corrected calmly, Green. Emma Green. And for the first time she saw respect spark in David's eyes, not because she pretended to be what she wasn't, but because she demanded space for who she was. Weeks passed and whispers softened. Not gone, but tempered by David's steadfastness and Emma's refusal to wilt. Slowly she began to see what Julie meant. Strength wasn't about matching their diamonds and airs. Strength was about not bending under them. One evening, after another long day where David had been buried in negotiations, he staggered into her flat and collapsed onto the couch. Emma handed him tea silently, waiting. He sipped, rubbing the tension from his temples, then finally looked at her. They're testing me, Emma. Investors, rivals, they want me distracted, insecure. And they think attacking you is the way to do it. Her chest tightened. And is it working? His eyes softened at her question. Not if you keep doing exactly what you're doing. Emma tilted her head. And what's that? Being unbreakable, he whispered. Her laugh cracked softly in the quiet. I don't feel unbreakable. But you are, he said, leaning close, forehead brushing hers. Every day you stay, every day you don't let them shove you out, that's strength. And it terrifies them. In the silence that followed, Emma realized something she hadn't before. Maybe she didn't need to transform into someone else to stand in David's life. Maybe all she had to do was root herself deeper into who she already was. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Emma had just begun to feel steady when the rug was pulled out. The whispers had dulled after weeks of cool defiance, her confidence slowly repairing itself. Walking beside David no longer felt like a spotlight burning her skin. It felt, cautiously, like something she could bear. She could breathe again. She could imagine a future, however fragile. Until the morning the headline appeared. Her cafe shift had barely begun when Julie slapped a folded newspaper onto the counter with trembling hands. Emma, you need to see this. Emma frowned, wiping her flour-dusted palms, and unrolled it. The photo hit her first. Her and David, caught unguarded, walking hand in hand across the River Park Bridge. She remembered the day, the way the sun had carved into golden ribbons on the water. Now it was plastered beneath a vicious headline. Cafe girl snags billionaire CEO. A Cinderella story or a calculated scam? Emma's stomach dropped so violently she had to grip the counter. Her vision blurred as she skimmed the venomous lines beneath. Obscure waitress. Conveniently spotted with Clark just as investor tensions rise. Rumors suggest opportunism, manipulation, a romance some insiders call laughably temporary. Her pulse roared in her ears. Scam. Opportunism. Gold digger. Julie shook her head angrily. This isn't just gossip, This is targeted. Customers in line glanced up. Some chuckled, some whispered. She felt the weight of stares like knives pressing into her back. Every sound in the cafe turned into a taunt. Her hands shook as she stuffed the paper back together. Who did this? She breathed. Julie exhaled sharply. That Marcus guy David clashed with? My bet is on him. He's got friends in media. They'd love a scandal. Emma barely finished her shift. Her chest felt too tight, breaths too shallow. By the time she walked out the side door into the cool afternoon, a camera flashed. Reporters had been waiting. Emma, one shouted, shoving a microphone forward. Are you planning to marry him for money? Emma, did you pursue David Clark deliberately? Do you think a waitress has what it takes to stand beside a billionaire? Her breath caught like glass in her throat. She shoved past, ignoring the barrage, but the words followed her down the street, echoing into her skull like a nightmare. She finally broke when she reached her apartment. Tossing her bag aside, she fell onto the bed in tears. All the strength she'd been building crumbled in waves of humiliation and fear. The knock came an hour later. She stumbled to the door, expecting perhaps Julie, but froze when she saw David. His hair disheveled, tie loosened, eyes raw. In his hand, another copy of the paper, folded and crushed. Emma, he whispered. But she shook her head, voice cracking. I can't do this. He stepped inside before she could stop him, hands gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. They're trying to rip us apart. That's their goal. You can't let them win. Her tears surged hotter. They already have. Do you know what it's like to walk into my job and see my face on the front page branded a scam artist? Do you know what it's like to be asked if I'm calculating my love for you? As if her voice broke. As if I'd ever use you. He flinched, pain darkening his eyes. I know, Emma. And it kills me. But listen to me, this isn't forever. Stories burn fast in this world. If we stand steady, they'll tire, they'll move on. Emma choked out, trembling. But can I? Can I withstand years of this? Every time we go out? Every headline? Maybe Marcus is right, I'll break. David's grip tightened. His voice lowered, desperate. You think I don't fear losing you every day? But Emma, what we have, do you really think it's worth throwing away because people who don't matter decided to be cruel? She looked at him, chest shaking, torn in two directions. His face was raw, unshaven, tired, not the untouchable CO, but the man who'd once brought her soup on a rainy night, who touched her like she wasn't invisible. But still, the knives of shame scraped inside her ribs. You chose this life, she whispered bitterly. I didn't. And maybe I'm not built for it. Silence landed like a weight. He released her shoulders slowly, eyes dulling into a kind of grief she had never seen in him before. If you walk away now, he said quietly, I'll understand. But know this, every headline fades, every scandal gets replaced. But a love like this, his throat tightened, doesn't come twice in a lifetime. The words cracked something deeper than anger. Tears spilled freely now. She turned away, scared that if she looked at him she'd crumble completely, either into his arms or out the door forever. The room was quiet except for her quiet sobs and his steadying breath. Finally, he set the paper on the table, smoothed it flat with deliberate restraint and whispered, I'll keep fighting, Emma. Even if you need to walk away tonight. He left before she could answer. The door shut gently behind him, leaving the apartment heavy with absence. Emma sank to the floor, clutching her knees, staring at the headline blazing from the tossed paper. Her love, her life, her name, all twisted into mockery for the world to laugh at. But behind her tears, something flickered stubbornly. She thought of Julie's words, you don't let them write your story. You do. Her chest still ached, but a fragile resolve began to rise from the rubble of her humiliation. Maybe this was the breaking point. Maybe this was where she had to decide once and for all whether she'd let them chase her away, or whether she'd finally claim her place, no matter how the world sneered. Morning light seeped through Emma's curtains, pale and cold, painting faded stripes across her worn carpet. She hadn't slept. Every second replayed in her head, the recoiling whispers, Marcus's cruelty, the newspaper headline branding her love a scam. All of it pressed down heavy. Yet somewhere past the haze of exhaustion, her mind found clarity. If she kept letting others dictate her story, she would be buried alive in theirs. She stood, shaky but determined, and pulled on the simplest dress she owned, not glamorous, not apologetic, simply hers. Then she slipped the loose ring back onto her finger. It still wobbled on her hand, imperfect, but it was the symbol of something she would no longer let anyone define for her. When David opened the door to her knock that afternoon, his eyes widened in shock. His shirt was rumpled, as though he hadn't changed since leaving her apartment. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. I read the article again, Emma said firmly. Her voice shook but didn't falter. And I realized something. They called me a scam. A distraction. Opportunist. Do you know what's worse? The fact that I almost let them be right. I almost let their voices be louder than mine. David swallowed hard, saying nothing, waiting. Emma stepped closer, ring glinting faintly. But it's not their story to tell. It's mine. And I refuse to walk away from the love I chose because strangers decided to laugh at me. His chest rose sharply, breath catching. He whispered, Emma? She lifted her chin, tears burning but unshed. I don't care if I never fit into their ballrooms. I don't care if I never learn the difference between champagne forks or how to smile like I belong. I belong where I choose. And I choose by your side. But if I'm going to stay, David, then you have to stop protecting me with half-truths. I don't need a shelter. I need a partner. All in or nothing. The air pulsed with gravity. For once, she wasn't the one trembling. He was. Slowly, David stepped forward, eyes rawer than she'd ever seen them. All in, he said hoarsely like an oath. His hand caught hers, strong and certain. You're right. I tried to shield you by lying, but all I did was weaken the bond we had. No more. I'll give you the truth, the fights and the burdens, everything. If you'll have me. Emma's throat trembled with the weight of it, but she nodded, letting the tears fall freely now. Then we fight together. For the first time in weeks, relief broke across his face like sunlight. Not the polished smile of a CEO smoothing boardroom politics, but the raw smile of a man carried through storms by hope. He pulled her against him, her head tucking perfectly under his chin, his arms wrapping with a kind of certainty that felt unshakable. But the world wouldn't fall silent simply because they chose love. That lesson came fast. Later that week, Emma accompanied him to another shareholder meeting. The tension in the room was palpable. Marcus was there, smirk sharp as always, waiting for his target to flinch. As Emma entered beside David, whispers buzzed again, poisonous, hungry. She felt the claws attempt to dig in. But this time she didn't bow her head. She met Marcus's gaze with calm fire, her posture upright, her arm linked confidently through David's. The whispers faltered. Good afternoon, Emma said clearly, nodding at the table before taking her seat beside David. Just her voice, steady and certain, shifted something intangible. For the first time, David's world saw her not as an accidental distraction, but as a woman who had chosen to stand unshaken in the storm. David slid his hand under the table to squeeze hers once, silent, grateful, proud. After the meeting, when they reached the quiet of the elevator, he whispered, "You stunned them." Emma allowed herself a small, tired smile. "I stunned myself." He brushed her cheek with his thumb. "That's why I love you. Because you don't even see the strength you carry. But it changes everything." The elevator doors swept open, carrying them back into the glow of the city night. The same city that would continue to test them, watch them, doubt them. But Emma no longer felt like she was drowning in it. Weeks passed into months. There were more whispers, some cruel, some curious, but Emma learned to let them roll against her like rain on windows. She poured the same fierceness she once used to survive cafe shifts into holding her ground in David's world. And slowly, grudgingly, the world adjusted. Clarion Tower's marble halls stopped treating her like a visitor. Investors stopped smirking quite as boldly. Marcus's laughter dulled, edged with frustration. But none of it mattered as much as the nights where David came home exhausted and Emma greeted him not as a CEO, but as the man she had said yes to in a park. The man who once drank cheap coffee and whispered promises. The man whose empire no longer frightened her, because she had realized it wasn't hers to conquer, it was his to carry and hers to walk beside. On one of those nights, under the gentle glow of lamplight in her little apartment, David kissed her hand. "When I proposed to you the first time, I gave you a ring that didn't fit. That wasn't just about money, it was about me not fitting my truth in your life." Emma tilted her head, amusement curving her lips. "You're saying my finger was too honest for your lies?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm saying I'd like to try again. This time with no masks. No hiding." From his pocket he pulled a small box, simple, sleek. Inside gleamed a ring, not garish or dripping diamonds, but elegant and solid. Strong like the life they were choosing. Emma's breath caught. The shimmer of the band reflected more than wealth, it reflected choice. "Emma Green," he said, voice steady yet thick with emotion, "will you say yes again? This time knowing all of me." Tears filled her eyes. But her answer didn't tremble. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, this time fitting perfectly, sealing not just a promise, but a decision forged in fire and honesty. And when he kissed her, soft and lingering, Emma realized something that no headline, no rival, no sneer could erase. She hadn't said yes to his empire. She had said yes to the man who, for all his power, needed her quiet courage just to remember what love really was. For the first time she smiled not like someone caught in a storm, but like someone who had chosen to walk through it, hand in hand, unafraid of the thunder.